Hold on. Yeah.
Hello and welcome to the Michael Mamas Show. I'm your host, Michael Mamas, and we're coming to you from Mount Soma, home of the Sri Someshwara Temple in the mountains of western North Carolina. Well, first, let's start 4th of July tomorrow, Independence Day, just the word independence to me is it's a great word. It's so important. People need to have their independence, and if you look at constitutions of alleged democracies all around the world, even communist countries will call themselves democratic states, and they're not. And well, if you just look at the news and stuff, it seems like even in America, we're losing a lot of our independence, and I don't think that sits well with Americans. We'll see what happens. And again, the news, I'm not paying much attention. I do, but at the same time, it's just more and more ridiculousness stacked on top of other ridiculousness. And I just can't help feeling it's going to straighten out. It's just too ridiculous. And the grassroots is realizing how ridiculous it is. And it's not going to last. The powers that be, they gain so much control. And you see that in organizations on all levels, and once they get that kind of control and that sort of power, they don't want to let it go. And they start to abuse the system. So that's it in a nutshell. There's my commentary on the news. Okay. Scotty.
Yeah.
You there?
Yeah. Good morning.
Good morning. So what's going on, Scotty?
Oh, I was on a hike yesterday, and I had been listening lately to a lot of Robert Kennedy Jr. And there's a guy on the hike with us that's a psychiatrist, and most of the people that are in the area here are voting Democrat. That's like heavy. And I said, we just had the conversations about the people that
that's in LA. Where did you hike?
It's over here in Pacific Palisades, and it's called Temescal. It's like a loop around. It's really nice.
Yeah, I don't know that. I know Pacific Palisades, but
yeah, it's just the area up behind it,
Nice.
Yeah, it's nice.
So what did he have to say?
Well, I was like, what did you think about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and what he has to say? And he's like, well, as a scientist, I don't agree with anything that he says. And I was like, well, I'm kind of new to the party with him, but from what I heard, I mean, what do you mean? He's not like a scientist or whatever. And the guy's like, well, he's like vaccine adverse or this or that. And I was like, wow, that's not what I heard, and he's like, well, what do you mean? And I was like, well, he's not putting down the fact that he's saying vaccines, sure, they can save lives, but we need to have long-term randomized trials on the effects of these vaccines.
And who said that?
Robert F. Kennedy. I said that to him about what Kennedy had said.
Right. And he's absolutely right.
Yeah, because
he's absolutely right.
Because what everybody has already been programmed to hear about him is that he's a anti-vaxxer, and he is anti-vax. From the standpoint of, we shouldn't be giving any of these kids these vaccines until they have long-term randomized tests of these vaccines. He's like, it's just insane. He's like,
but now the guy you went on the hike with didn't agree with that?
No, he didn't understand that. He had no idea. It's just the narrative that's out there for Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Yeah, and it's changing though. People, I mean, not to gloat or anything, Scotty, but right from the very beginning with the vaccines, you and I were both aware that, hey, this is not safe, this is not good.
Right.
And we caught a lot of flack for it, you know.
Sure.
But at this point, it's come out so much that, I mean, I think you have to have bury your head in the sand to not realize that that whole thing was a disaster.
Yeah.
And I don't know, perhaps the one good thing that came out of it is that people realize now that these scientists are not gods.
Right.
Uh, and just basic common sense. Like I said, geez, how many years ago was it now when I said that our grandmothers would have done a much better job managing the COVID epidemic than the physicians did. And
Well,
I don't mean to undermine anybody or anything. At the same time, you know, people need to wake up. You know, taking all the sick people and healthy people and what, and cloistering them in, you know, in a tall building in Manhattan with all the windows shut was obviously dumb.
yeah.
But that's what they did, you know. So anyway, go on.
Well, and it was funny because I had to them, it's like it sounds like more like the science that you're talking about has to shift their
Mhm.
narrative to, okay, we're going to put this vaccine out. It may help a certain group. It may hurt this group. We don't know. And we're just going to let the whole thing play out and
Well,
figure that
more and
out.
more is coming out. More and more is coming out now that the vaccine is really harming a lot of people.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean is that it's more like that narrative is going to be changing to, we're going to come out with this vaccine and we're hoping it helps more than it hurts. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And it's going to
Mm.
hurt a certain amount of people, and that's just like, what do they call that? Um, Collateral damage, or
Collateral damage.
right? Basically, that's what it is, right?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And do you know that in the Vedic literature, the ancient rishis, they had things to do that um, strengthened the immune system, protected the home, uh, and it fell by the wayside. It's amazing that there's such a powerful Vedic technology out there that has just become ignored. And how could that be? You know, the knowledge is there, but how did it happen? Well, you know, through the generations, first of all, knowledge starts to slip through the fingers and things get compromised. Uh, for example, with an Ayurveda formula, maybe they don't have one of the ingredients, so they substitute something else. Many different things happen. And then, of course, with war and invasions of countries, the integrity of the culture gets compromised more, and the knowledge of that culture gets replaced by the knowledge of the invading nation. And before you know it, you got a hodgepodge mess, you know. So it's just the nature of time, really. Uh, but it's such a shame. And really, that's in a nutshell is what is Mount Soma about. Mount Soma is bringing back that knowledge in its pure state, pure knowledge. Veda. What is Veda? Veda is nature, the underlying nature of existence. And we have the knowledge, the Vedic knowledge. It's there, but it's been ignored. Living in harmony with nature is the key, and that doesn't mean living in a log cabin and going around barefoot. I mean, that's anyway. All that's getting straightened out. People are going to wake up. They are waking up. It's all going to change. Right now, we live just like it in the little blurb that went with the title of this podcast. Rudderless. The whole thing is there's no rudder now to the mentality of humanity. Uh, cling to one thing, cling to another thing, it all just wobbles. The ship's going astray. And so I said, you know, rudderless in the river, or is it? Because there is a rudder, but it's been ignored. It's pure knowledge. It's knowledge that dwells deep within every individual but is shrouded by their identities, their preconceived notions, just like this psychologist you're talking about, Scotty. It's there. But it's no simple thing to look past our current conditionings. That's why I say most of our karma, it's between our ears and it's in our hearts. It becomes our mentality. It becomes how we think. It determines what we think, what we believe. And it's a conditioning. It's a programming. That's why they call it spiritual emancipation. You're not gaining anything. You're just losing the shroud. The divinity is already there within you. But it's been shrouded by convictions and beliefs and all that. There are 2 ways of purifying out that shroud. One of them is ruled by Shani, Saturn. Now, what do I mean by Saturn? The planets, the grahas, they are mappings. They're mirror reflections, if you will, if we're talking about the planets in outer space, of a deeper mechanic, a mechanic of the structure of the unified field itself. That's the real study of Jyotish. Jyotish means light. The whole progression of the gaining of knowledge ultimately culminates in when you see the light of Jyotish, the light of the divine, the light of the transcendent. So Shani is just one component of that process. Saturn. It's the law of nature, cause and effect. It's everywhere. For every action, there's an equal but opposite reaction. And so as things move and everything's gravitating back to the absolute, and you see that gravitation mapping in all sorts of things. You know, you plant a seed, it grows into a great tree, new seeds created, fall to the earth. The cycle continues back to Mother Earth, back to Mother Earth, back to Mother Earth. And then into the relative expression, and then back to Mother Earth. So there's a cycle there. Everything gravitates back to Mother Earth. And the laws of nature of karma, they say Shani is the Lord of karma, cause and effect, the laws of nature on that level. And so as you live in life, and we're talking about generations, lifetimes like that, the karma gradually gets resolved, gets worked out. And it's hard knocks. That's why a lot of people are so terrified of Shani, because, you know, all that karma comes back to get you, and life is a struggle, you know? And yeah, you will evolve in spite of anything you do or anything you think, because everything is gravitating back to the ocean of oneness, Mother Earth. But that's a tough way to evolve. So there's the Shani principle, but there's also the Brihaspati principle, the guru. Guru is another name for the Jupiter. Brihaspati, another name for Jupiter, the planet. And again, it maps into the mechanics of creation. But that's a very different method of gaining knowledge of our own true nature, learning to live in harmony with our own true nature, the transcendental value. And that's like the bestower of knowledge. Brihaspati offers knowledge on a silver platter. All the meditation techniques we might learn, a lot of the principles in the Vedic literature, the Upangas, the Vedangas, all of that, the Shastras within the Upangas, all that facilitates, speeds up our evolution. And why do we want to speed it up? Because we don't want to suffer. Going through the hard knocks of life, regulated purely by Shani, is a tough way to live. As we evolve, we become emancipated. Emancipated from what? Laws of karma, suffering, you know? And that's what Mount Soma is all about. We've been offered. It's there. It's in the Vedic literature. How to build a unified field generator. that purifies the global consciousness, cleans the fishbowl, as we've said it in the past, the fishbowl of the earth. And as we clean the fishbowl, the global consciousness becomes better, all problems go away. It's a panacea. Why? Because everything boils down to one problem. Pollution of the atmosphere, conflict within people's own hearts and minds, conflict with other people, all the turmoil that's going on in the world today, all the confusion, it all boils down to polluted fishbowl, polluted global consciousness. Because it's when the global consciousness is not cleared, not purified, people don't function in harmony with nature. And even their notion of what functioning in harmony with nature means is all confused. So we're just going to build the unified field generator, the enlightened city, given to us by Mamuni Mayan, who's, a cosmic architect for planet Earth. It's there. What's really incredible is that nobody pays any attention. No, it's not built, doesn't exist on the planet. Anyway, I was asked, and I'll just read it to you. Somebody wrote, and they wrote a comment, and they said, I know it's off topic. Well, I'd encourage people to write comments of these podcasts. If you go to michaelmamas.net, you'll see a little thing there underneath the title and all for each podcast comment. And I don't go through all the old ones, but the most recent one I look. If people make a comment, I read it, and I respond. The comments used to be really lively when we just did blogs. But as soon as we switch over to the podcast, I guess the blogs are right there at michaelmamas.net to read the blog. But now I guess people are at the podcast and they don't want to take that step, I guess, to go to michaelmamas.net to make a comment. But at any rate, someone did make a comment, and they say this is off topic, they say, but I would love to know what you think of NDE, near-death experiences, and the people who experience, have near-death experiences, and pre-birth memories. She goes on, she says, I've listened to several hundreds of these testimonies, and they have several things in common. And this is interesting. They say, what disturbs me the most is that many of them remember being forced to reincarnate, and also having their memories wiped. See, we're getting into shaky ground there. It's not really like that. Not many people are really forced. See, the idea of being forced to reincarnate, I'll tell you where that comes from. Isn't it common that people say, oh boy, I just want to get enlightened this lifetime because life is such a struggle, I don't want to have to come back. I think probably most everybody, at least somebody, say that. It's a common feeling. And so from there, we think, well, after we die and we're not in the physical body anymore, we don't want to reincarnate. And so we'd be forced to reincarnate. That's really not the way it usually works. I mean, it's field of all possibilities it could, but that's rare. That's not nearly as common as seems to be referenced here. People want to reincarnate, and I'll tell you why, because it's easy to see the bigger picture. It's easy to see the divinity of life when you don't have to pay the rent, when you don't have conflicts, when you're not in a physical body. But through Shani, that's how we evolve, as we work through that karma. And also, when we're not in the body, we naturally gravitate to a deeper level of our being. And we say, man, if I could just reincarnate, I'll do it right this time. I won't make these stupid mistakes. I'll meditate every day. I'll really practice all the teachings in the Shastras and stuff, and I'm going to become a better person, and I'm going to evolve, and I'm going to get enlightened. So people want to reincarnate. And in fact, you could even say that they beg to get loaded up with as much karma as they can get loaded up with so that they can purify it out, work through it, because they're determined. That's a more common attitude, really, of the disembodied, if you will. And then this idea of also having their memories wiped, as if that's a bad thing. That is called grace.
Michael,
Think
is
of
that
all
it?
the think of all the difficult experiences we've had and the conflicts we've had with people. And if we reincarnate, oh yeah, I remember you, you did this, and oh man, I suffered during the Civil War, and it was so horrible, and that's all I can think about. It's a gift that we don't have those memories. What are you going to say, Scotty?
I was wondering, you said there's a desire to kind of load it on so you can work. Is there some kind of benefit to that, or is it just something that
Well,
people desire?
um, if you're given too big an engine, you're going to run off the road. And so if you could handle it and purify your karma, wonderful. But with all that karma, again, karma is between your ears and in your heart. So you load it all up. And once you're in a physical body carrying all that karma, part of the karma is you got a bad attitude. Uh, you don't want to meditate. Uh, and all the bad things that people do. That's part of the karma between your ears and in your heart. So best to be given just enough that you can handle and work through. Uh, but stay on the path, if you will. Stay dedicated to the Brihaspati component of human evolution. See, the karma is there. It needs to be resolved. But through the Brihaspati component, it's as if you take that karma to a deeper level and you resolve it at a deeper level. So it's kind of like if you weren't meditating and stuff, maybe the karma was coming and it was going to cause a terrible accident and you're going to break your arm. So if you take that karma to a different level, then when that karma comes back, you might just stub your toe and say, oh, gee, and then just keep going. So there's a technology, you see, and that's just one example, but there's these technologies where we can resolve the karma on a deeper level, And then they go on to say, how are we supposed to correct our mistakes if we can't remember why we were here, nor our last life? The mistakes we made, what we learned, and what we learned from the past life. See, the thing is about that, we're talking about true learning here. We're not talking about, oh, I get it intellectually. Okay, yeah, I learned that in my past life, and so I'm not going to do it in this lifetime. That's too superficial. That kind of thinking, and we all share it. It's so commonplace. It's how we function. But we think we can think our way through life, but we don't think our way through life. We feel our way through life. And I don't mean feeling into our karmic feelings, but feeling deeper into the finest feeling level that what I've talked about before, but what Maharishi Patanjali talked about in the Yoga Sutras, the intuitive level, which means the gut feeling level, which means the gut feeling level that happens when you're living in harmony with nature, not the gut feeling level that's a result of karmic conditioning, you see. So remembering all that in that sense, oh yeah, I remember my past life, oh, I remember this, oh, I remember that. That's not going to fix it. And even if you did, and you say, oh, okay, well, I'm not going to do that anymore. Well, that's just a Band-Aid. That's a Band-Aid. And whatever the conditioning was that is deeper, it's still there. It's still there. It didn't go away. You just shrouded it. Because now I remember my past life, so I'm not going to do that again. So it's a blessing for more than one reason when people don't remember their past lives that well or don't remember them at all. I could go on about that. I mean, I think that's enough about that for now. But now, near-death experiences, let's talk about that. There are different levels of existence, different levels of even heaven, and all the different levels of existence. And we can even talk from the perspective of earth plane existence and how we view things from this perspective, you could say that the different locus, the different levels of existence are, well, from that perspective, it would be kind of like they're different psychological states, different mental states, different dream states, if you will. Now, from those levels, we look at the earth plane and, well, this is the illusion. But from the earth plane perspective, looking at those, they can almost seem like those are the illusions and this is real, you see. So when we talk about near-death experiences, oftentimes, most commonly, what it is we go to what I call an astral level. And the astral, the astral is the full spectrum, really, of everything from, devils and demons to angels and devas. And so a lot of times when people have near-death experiences, it's an astral thing, kind of like a dream. Dreams are astral, okay, generally speaking. And so oftentimes near-death experiences are just that. People are released from the physical body for a period of time. And it's like, oh, again, emancipation in that sense. And they have these beautiful experiences, and they are beautiful. But they can be, astral, which isn't bad. It's just, it's not the deepest level. It's not the most profound level. It's not the transcendental level, really. Or with near-death experiences, people can go to deeper and deeper locus, higher and higher locus, more and more profound locus. It just depends. But all that is real. And I think if you understand it, it's just common sense, really. Especially once you get into the idea that once the physical body dies, we don't die. Just the physical body, we shed the physical body. And once you get onto that and you understand that, then only then can we really start, right, cultivating a wiser and healthier relationship with near-death experiences and all that stuff. So we talk about life and death and the cycle of birth and death. But what lies beyond that, and what's really more important than that, is the transcendental level, that place where we are truly divine, not an astral echo of our true divinity. But I'm talking about transcendental. See, things map, it correlates. And oftentimes we have an experience that correlates to, oh yeah, I feel one with everything. I remember I was giving a lecture back in the 70s and some guy put up his hand and says, oh, I know everything you're talking about. I took a hit of LSD and I felt like I was one with everything. I know everything you're talking about. Those are echoes, echoes of truth perceived as truth, hold truth at bay, I'd like to say. So the whole thing is highly elusive, highly elusive. Now, the other thing about karma is that there's a time lag to it. Think about it. If there was no time lag to karma, if for every cause the effect was immediate, everything would be resolved instantly. And if everything is resolved instantly, the relative existence would cease to exist. So why is there a time lag to karma? Well, usually there isn't. But to create this plane of existence, to create the earth plane, there has to be. So we could say that this is the plane of time lag of karma. And the time lag of karma, it varies for different things. Some things are instant, stub your toe and ouch. Other things, there can be an act and the karma comes back next lifetime, So it's important to realize that there's that time lag. And that is a big reason why it's tough intellectually to resolve everything, to understand everything, to have it make sense. How are we supposed to correct mistakes if we can't remember why we're here? nor our last life here. Well, it speaks to that, doesn't it? That's not the way we resolve it. That's not the way we work through it. We work through it by evolving our relationship with the depth of our being, not an intellectual construct of the surface, on the surface. That's called the I get it syndrome. Oh yeah, I read Be Here Now and I read the Bhagavad Gita and I get it. That's an echo of truth perceived as truth. Now, reading the Bhagavad Gita, listening to Vedic literature, all of that, it does have an influence. And that influence over time has a Brihaspati component to it. So it does help us evolve. But if we try to take it and say, oh, I get it, I mean, go ahead and do that if you want. If that'll keep you listening to it, more power to you. But it's not really the beyond and end all by any means. That's the beginning mistaken for the goal, mistaken for the end, if you want to put it that way.
So, Michael, is there a kind of mindset that you would say is more advantageous to take than others in terms of your evolution, or just how to go about this kind of thing?
Good question. Great question, Scotty. Humility. We can learn all these things, we can read about all these things, but humility is the flip side of wisdom. And again, I'm not talking about, a construct of humility. Oh, I'm going to pretend like I'm humble, and therefore I'm more evolved, and I'm going to display everybody how evolved I am because I'm so humble. I'm talking about real humility as a physiological state. You see, it's a psychological state, if you want to put it in those terms. Humility is the flip side of wisdom. The only true knowing is knowing that you know nothing. The field of no thingness, the field of kaivalya, the field of bhavati tam, chaitanya, that which lies beyond relative. That's real knowledge, awakening to that. The rest is just echoes of truth, you see. But we have to navigate. We navigate through echoes of truth, and through that, gradually, we do evolve until finally one day we awaken to not an echo of truth, but truth, the transcendent. That's called liberation, moksha, if you will. Is that responsive, Scotty?
Sure.
Yeah. Now, just on a pragmatic level, we have imbalances there, and everybody goes out of balance from time to time. I like to say that I don't judge a person by whether or not they ever go out of balance or not. Everybody goes out of balance. And I don't think we should even judge people. But if you were going to judge, if you were going to evaluate people, a better parameter would be how do they work with getting back into balance once they've gone out of balance? Yeah, okay, they went out of balance, but they worked with it. They were self-honest about it. Self-honesty is a big topic, and they realized that they were wrong. Some people, that's unbearable. The very idea that they could be wrong feels like a self-annihilation. They would never want to admit to themselves, let alone anyone else, that they did something wrong. And so they hold on to their state of imbalance, their attitude of imbalance, and they defend it. Ridiculous. We can spin every situation a million different ways and justify each one as the truth, as wisdom, what have you. But how you feel about each of those things, each of those perspectives, is that from you? Is that what you feel? Or is it your karma, your conditioning between your ears and in your heart that determines how you're feeling and what you're projecting? We're talking about the art of discernment here. Adi Shankar has said that the spiritual path is the path of discernment. Discernment is a rare and highly elusive art. It's something that needs to be practiced. I know somebody once said, I've been meditating 10 years. I have discernment. Ridiculous. First of all, this stuff isn't measured by how many years you've been meditating. It's measured, if you're going to measure it, by how many lifetimes. But even that is highly elusive. There's such a thing, it says in the Yoga Vashisha, is an enlightened mosquito. I mean, there's a field of all possibilities, and it's all based on probability bell curve, if you will. That's another, the bell curve is an incredible thing, goes right down to the nature of electrons and how we function and supernatural powers and all that, really. Nice quote, Ralph Waldo Emerson. I've been a fan of his since I was in the 5th grade. He said, "Who you are speaks so loudly, I can't hear what you're saying." Isn't that the truth? Your behavior, how you hold yourself, what energy you're radiating out, shooting out of you, if you want to say it that way. That says so much more than words, especially if you're just parroting quotes of enlightened people or, words of wisdom. But see, the trouble with that quote is that how do we determine when we look at another person who they are? Is it based on our projection? Is it based on the conditioning and the programming, the karma between our ears and our hearts? Or is it coming from a place of deeper wisdom and insight? The whole thing is highly, highly elusive. But we do well to understand these things, Those imbalances, they lead to moments of inappropriate behavior. The causes can be quite variable. It can be from childhood wounds. It can be from something you ate the night before. Fatigue. I remember when my daughters were little, they get sleepy and then they get weepy and grumpy. I used to say, "Oh, sleepy, weepy." We do the same thing as adults. We just kind of try to hide it a little bit. Another nice quote, Woody Allen. He once said, 80% of success in life is just showing up. I don't know about 80%, but boy, are you willing to just show up? A lot of people aren't. Kind of got into this in the previous podcast, didn't I? In an indirect sense. Put the boat in the water and then keep the water out of the boat, like Raman, sort of to take off on a Ramana Maharshi's quote. Putting the boat in the water, that's just show up. A lot of people don't want to. They don't want to just show up. They want to avoid life's challenges. They don't want to deal with it. And so their boat's not in the water. How are they going to move downstream? This quote looks like it didn't show up. It was Aristotle. He said, "Think as a wise man thinks, as the wise men think, but talk like the common people." How many people try to hold themselves a certain way, maybe end each sentence on an upbeat? "I'm so happy that you have arrived here." Something just to try to sound, or maybe with a certain kind of accent. Particularly if you're put in a position where people believe that you are a person of knowledge or a spiritual teacher or something. By putting on a facade like that, it misleads people. People think, well, if I behaved like that, then I'd be more involved. And so they try to behave a certain way. And if they can succeed in that, then they must be involved too. And it's not true. It's deceptive. It's a cruel form of teaching. It's a rudderless world out there. I got that word rudderless. who was one of the Supreme Court justices used that to refer to the world, basically what's going on today. And I thought it was a great word, rudderless. No rudder. The only true rudder is the transcendent, and it's a field of no thingness. It's a state of physiology where we're functioning in harmony with nature. And the whole thing is highly elusive, highly paradoxical. There's just one quote. There are a whole lot of things in this world of ours you haven't even started wondering about. How do I put it? I used to say, the world is not as you have been led to believe. The world is not as we have been led to believe. There's a great app that I recently got, and I'm loving it. I got into it from perspective of lifting weights, but they also have a thing on hatha yoga, asanas. And now I'm doing that, and I just love it. It's called Muscles and Motion. It's worth checking out. They have these diagrams of, what would you call it? You know, they show the anatomy of the muscles and the bones as people go through different asana postures, and then their guidance and their instruction is outstanding. And so I hardly ever lift weights now. I do the yoga asanas, and I attribute it to that site. It's an excellent site. It's well worth checking out if you're at all interested in that. And it's inspiring. It's inspiring. It's very motivating. Anything else, Scotty?
No, I think
one last thing. I'm sorry, Scotty. One last thing I want to say. Congregation spaces in the home. The more, the better. In our home, the kitchen. When one person is cooking, the other person's sitting there talking to them or helping. It's a great place to just congregate. The food turns out better. The whole vibe turns out better. The kitchen feels so much better. And the more congregation spaces you have, the better. Another congregation space in the home here is the front porch. Just sit on the front porch and look out at the view and talk. And I think Robert Redford said something about that really good relationships and friends, you don't even have to talk. You can be together, Out by the pond in the backyard, that's another congregation space here. We've got a bunch of them where we meditate, another congregation space. If you don't have a congregation space that feels really good, create one. Basically, we're talking about hanging out together, and there's a vibe in a particular room that you create, and it creates a congregation space. All right. I think that relationships are so important, and congregation spaces and honoring them can go a long way into sustaining healthy relationships. All right, I guess that's it for this week. Have a nice 4th of July, those of you that are in the US. And we'll talk to you again next week. Thanks for listening.